director, and I want to just come and say hello to lots of you. All and everybody waves. There's even a cat. Wonderful. Hello, Cindy. Hello, Rosemary. Hello, Wolfram. Good to see you. Hello, Connecting to Audio. There we go. I've made the joke, the obligatory terrible joke of the day. Hello, Ted. Hello, Robin. Hello, Ros, Marie, Siobhan, Paul, Catherine, Alison, Pat, Mike. Good to see you all. Welcome, 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 welcome. It's lovely to have you as ever. Now, so commences the waffle that we do before every session, just to make sure everybody's in. I've just spotted a llama sat next to Cindy Ellis. Cindy, round of applause for you. Those of you that are brand new to Stay at Home Choir will be wondering why I'm calling out a llama. The llama is our mascot. Lucy will need to make an appearance soon, and I see that as well. Lovely to have you all. Give us a wave if you are brand new to Stay at Home Choir, please. I'd love to come and say hello to you. Stop waving if you're too nervous to say hello back. I'll ask you to unmute and say hello. John, I saw you the other day. It's good to see you again. I'm going to spot Nancy Martin. Can I come and say hi, Nancy?
Hi.
Nancy, hello. How are you?
Oh, I'm well. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. You are new to Stay at Home Choir, yes?
I am.
Welcome. You're very, very welcome. So are you a long-term Evangelini fan then?
Yes, early music nerd, and live in Canada, in Toronto, and have had some contact with Greg Skidmore. And, so, you know, through one person leading me in through another way, and I just thought I'd try it, and I just love Monteverdi.
Oh, fantastic. Well, you're amongst friends here, Nancy, that's for sure. Well, early music nerd, that's good. But virtual choir newbie, or is it just...
No, I've done One World. No, I'm not a newbie. I've been doing One World Baroque with Daniel Taylor for the last year.
Fantastic. Well, so you know exactly how all of this works then. Yeah. Nancy, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
But hang on, I'm having an audio problem. Your voice is crackly, and I don't know if it's just my video or if anybody...
Oh dear.
Not just you.
Yeah. The gremlins are back. Okay. I've heard that I'm at least intelligible, so my apologies, everyone. I'm not sure what the issue is, but I will work to fix it by next session.
Thank you.
Those of you that, Nancy, it's lovely to have you here. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. The waffle is over. Welcome to the Evangelini project. Those of you that haven't been in our social or our Italian session earlier in the week, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. We're very, very excited. My name is Jamie Wright. I'm a singer and conductor in London. I sing with a group called the Swingles, and I am 50% of the founding musical team of Stay at Home Choir. We've now been going for quite some time now. It's rather exciting, isn't it? My partner in crime, Tori Longdon, is somewhere. I've lost her. Tori, where are you?
Hello. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Early Music Geek Out project. We are so excited to be doing Rimanti in Parce. I am a conductor based in London, and I'm the other half of the Stay at Home Choir duo. Yes, I think, you know, most of you know me anyway, so hello and nice to meet you all. I'd also like to give a shout out to Jesse Van Proctor, who is wearing a Sing the Score t-shirt, which I think, considering he is based in Australia, is a supreme effort. So well done, Jesse, for wearing a Sing the Score t-shirt. And for those of you who don't know what Sing the Score is yet, it is only a matter of time. That takes... I'll hand back to you, Jamie, to introduce the man of the hour.
Well, before that, I will do just a little bit of housekeeping. Is my audio any better, anyone? No, maybe not.
No,
okay.
you're still traveling.
My apologies. Well, before we continue, I'm going to just do a little bit of housekeeping, please. Those of you that do plenty of Zoom sessions like this will be used to the raise hand function. If you have any questions, we will be asking you to submit questions to the chat. Please, by all means, do so, but we will be turning off the chat once we get rolling, just so it doesn't distract too many people. For those of you that would like subtitles, there are now subtitles available at the bottom. You just need to click the button and you'll be able to read along and enjoy some of the words that it definitely doesn't quite get right, but I hope that's enough of a guidance otherwise. And finally, hello to everybody on the patio. It is lovely to have you joining us. Those of you that don't know, the patio is those watching on YouTube. Without further ado, it is a great pleasure to introduce Robert Hollingworth, director of Evangelini, who I learnt today are in their 35th year of performing, which is rather incredible. Robert, I've lost your screen already. Before I spotlight you, all I will do, everybody, if you haven't yet squirreled away and found Evangelini's website and their upcoming concerts with Live from London and the like, I know they're doing lots of very exciting things, please do go and find them. If you need to grab your score before the session, you can go to www.stayathomechoir. Once you've logged in, everything you need is there, from the Italian coachings that you can download to the score. So please make sure you have that ready. We will be working on that today. Without further ado, Mr. Robert Hollingworth, it is a pleasure to have you. Hello.
Well, we're talking about T-shirts. As I guess you've mostly been doing 20th century songs, it's time for this T-shirt, I suppose. Yeah, Monty Python, Monteverdi, two close interests of mine, I would say. Lovely to be here, lovely to be involved, and lovely to do something that's a little bit different, something without a very obvious in-your-face pulse, but something actually which the sense of pulse is absolutely crucial for. A strange day, actually, because at 1 o'clock this afternoon, I'm up in York, in sort of central northern England, and I was coaching my master's group here, a one-to-a-part group, on this very piece. They'd chosen to do it. Probably too cheapskate to come and do the actual stay-at-home project, so they thought they'd get it direct from the horse's mouth. So that was right. So there's a double helping of Rimanti in Pace for me. And one of the singers had said to me earlier in the day, of course, you know, we do know that Rimanti in Pace is his most famous madrigal, so but we're going to do it anyway. That really wasn't the case a few years ago. I mean, I'm delighted that they should think that it is. I've done a Sing the Score, a YouTube episode on it, because I think it's fantastic. But it really wasn't a well-known piece. It's not a tremendously easy known piece, but goodness me, it's a worthwhile piece. It's a piece you can really get your teeth into. And like a lot of the best bits of early music, like Bach, Monteverdi, you can sing it in a lot of different ways. And we're going to have to sing it in one way because that's the nature of the project. But you could do the piece in other ways. And just as a starting point, and this may disturb some of you who come to early music to get away from this kind of thing, but I would suggest to you that this piece is at least as close to Puccini as it is to Tallis. There's something of the Italian lyricism, the colors that we'll be looking for. Perhaps you had this a little bit with Matteo when he did the Italian session with you, that is very, very passionate. We're not talking about style of vocal production. We're not talking about that, but the intensity is really very, very strong. So I've got a few words I'm going to read out first. I've been asked before we get singing today just to say a little bit about the piece. And I thought I could start with, someone mentioned Greg Skidmore. So why don't we start with Greg Skidmore? Here's 8 seconds from Greg Skidmore talking about this piece. Let's, please shout immediately if it doesn't come on. I'm going to press just the screen button. Here we go.
Are you kidding? Aside from it being the slow burn of all slow burns, and it makes you cry, it has that bit where he restrikes the dissonance and your insides go all funny. Oh! This was the first piece I ever sang with Evangelini. I grew up a Tallis and Bird geek, and I'm still a Tallis and Bird geek, but this one piece made me think of Renaissance music in a completely different way. Passionate and human and red-blooded stuff.
So that was Greg. And here's one with
This piece
Claire.
always comes up when we're talking about our favourite Monteverdi madrigal. It's just got the most incredible harmonies, and it's the perfect expression of love and loss in miniature form.
Very careful to press the right X. So yes, it's a passionate little piece. And how does this fit into things? Well, it's a madrigal. What is a madrigal? A madrigal is a piece. It's a piece for separate voices. It's not. It's a piece written for one to a part. This particular piece was written in 1592. If you like your timelines, that's 4 years after the Spanish Armada, when the 25-year-old composer Claudio Monteverdi had been working as a singer and a string player at the ducal court of Mantua in northern Italy. And I think I've got a picture of just where that is. Click. it's between Milan and Venice. There's an aerial view of the palace. And this little area in here is where they discovered only a few years ago, where the Monday evening madrigal concerts were held. I just let the film play. That's where it is. And you can see an artist's reconstruction of what it might have looked like with all the mirrors, and then a version of how some of it looks now. That's from the Sing the Score episode I've done on this piece. I'd love to go and sing in there one day. I think it might have been quite a resonant room. So yes, madrigals. This was the final piece in Monteverdi's third book of madrigals, and that begs the question, what is a madrigal? Well, we're going to do a session on Sunday about what a madrigal is with some examples, but briefly, a madrigal is a piece of secular music for several different voices, usually between 3 and 6, invented and popularized in Italy in the 16th century. For those of you who really know your stuff, you'll be saying, oh, but what about the 14th century madrigal? Yes, there is a 14th century madrigal, but it's just the name that's the same. It has nothing to do with what we're looking at. And one of the reasons that the madrigal is so important in music history is that the form appears, and perhaps because of partly, at about the same time as the invention of cheap music printing. The first music print, I think, is, I can never remember whether it's 1499 or 1501, one year either side of 1500. But these were elaborately prepared woodcuts, each piece a sort of work of art. But by the mid-late 1520s, they'd worked a way of basically copying what happened in normal printing, which was movable type. So you would have your 5 lines of script, and you would have, say, a semibreve, a whole note on the top, no clef in front of it, just that. And then in the next box, you would have your semibreve over that top line, and then the next box down there, and then the next box down there. And so you would have a semibreve on every single line and space in different boxes, and then you would have a minim, a half note on every single space, and then a crotchet, quarter note, etc., etc. And you would take them out of the box and you put them next to each other, and then you have the text as well, and these would all be squeezed together, and then you would do the next line, and it would end up looking something like this. I hope you can see this, which is a rather sort of jiggled, you can even see, because each little bit is about 3 millimeters across, you know, what is that, an eighth of an inch or something across there, and you squeeze them all together. And you would print that, and then when it was printed, you would undo the presses. And then the best bit about being a printer, I always imagine, is you could bang the thing on the floor and tell your apprentice to pick all the bits up and put them back in the right boxes again. But the point is you could reuse them. That was the thing. So the 1520s, it becomes much, much cheaper to do this, which means that many more people can afford to buy them for the first time. So printed music, which was previously something, and manuscripts of music, something that only could be afforded by the few, was now afforded by large numbers of people. And this, in fact, is a part book. I'm just going to check you're still there because I'm looking at a script at the moment. Oh, you're still there. That's great, isn't it? This is a part book. It says altus at the top. The second set of madrigals for 3, 4, 5, 6 voices, apt for both viols and voices, viols and voices, newly composed by John Wilby, 1609 in London, published by Thomas East. And you open it up. This is a reprint. It's not an original 16th century book. There it is again, altus. And as you open it up inside, there's a nice dedication to the lovely lady Arabella Stewart, which I'm writing a program about at the moment. And there's a table of the pieces, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then the first bit, and there is your part, and that's what you'd sing from, which isn't so very different from the individual parts that you can sing from if you choose to on this project. At the beginning, you get a little clef. The clef, oh dear, it's difficult to see, isn't it, with the light? Oops, I come in a bit, I'll pull it back a bit. Clef, it is telling you where middle C is, not G, as a treble clef tells you. And then off it goes. No bar lines. Impossible to say to go from bar 23. So I think people would have got quite good at the most difficult bit of it, which is reading rests that just appear as blocks. We tend to follow, don't we, other parts. And then over the page. So this is all the alto parts for Wilby's second book. And then over here is the quintus part, which is the fifth voice, whatever that's going to be. And so it's very much the same for Monteverdi's. I just happen to have Wilby's in my possession. So this is all the second soprano parts or the second tenor parts. And that's what a part book is. Can you imagine the excitement of going to a shop in 1530 and getting a new set of part books? I mean, Netflix, eat your heart out. This was the real thing. This was at home, candlelight, making music that you would never have heard in. It's not like, oh, I heard Beethoven Fifth, and I'm now going to do it as they did in the 19th century on a couple of pianos, playing through, which is a similar form of domestic music making. This is music you'd never heard before. And one of the stories of 16th music is how music gets more complicated, more dramatic, more graphically descriptive. But the interesting thing is the most successful commercial book of madrigals in the whole of the 16th century, right into the 17th century, it was never out of print for 100 years, was a book that some of you may well have sung from. It's Arkadelt's first book of madrigals from 1539 for just 4 voices. And you think, of course I haven't sung it. I don't go around sniffing in antiquarian bookshops, although I'm quite sure some of you do. It's the book with Il bianco e dolce cigno in it, the sweet and white swan, which, turn this thing on, goes. Lovely, lovely 4-part piece. And this piece was reprinted again and again. The whole book was reprinted again and again. So madrigals, very popular. Anyway, I mustn't do too much of Sunday's talk now. But it's interesting how if you were a member of the middle class, you were expected to be able to read music. It was something that you would do. Even gentlemen, you were expected to be able to read your part with, just given your note and off you went, and to be able to count rests. And there's a story about this. It's a bit of marketing, so you probably shouldn't believe it. But 1597, Thomas Morley, an English composer, now is the month of May. He's that Thomas Morley. He wrote a book for composers, really, called A Plain and Easy Introduction to Music. And the crucial thing about a plain and easy introduction to music is that it is neither plain nor easy. And goodness knows what people made of it at the time. But Morley had a monopoly on printing, so he could go and print it anyway. And it's really a discussion between a composer and his apprentice. But in the flyleaf to this book, there you are in your lovely bookshop in 1597, you come across this thing. And Morley, in the flyleaf, is trying to get people to buy the book. And he says he was at dinner at somewhere in 1590 something. And he says, but supper being ended at this dinner party, and music books, according to the custom, being brought to the tables, the mistress of the house presented me with a part, earnestly requesting me to sing. But then after many excuses, I protested unfeignedly that I could not. Everyone began to wonder, yea, some whispered to others, demanding how I was brought up. So this was part of your education. You were expected to be able to sight read. Now, the book of how to be a courtier in the 16th century, Il Cortegiano, by Baldassare Castiglione, which was translated later into English, talks about this and says, a bit like knowing the right clothes to wear, knowing how to talk to people, you need to be able to sing music. And madrigals are always about love. And he says, gentlemen, you need to be able to do this as well, although not too much, he says. He says it makes gentlemen effeminate to sing about love too much. So that kills all of us who've sung madrigals our entire life. Excuse me, I need to let the dog out of the room. He's getting quite excited. Hang on a second. Go on, Manny.
I know how he feels.
Okay, that's that. So Italian madrigals kick off round about late 1520s, 1530s. And really they're sort of French chansons by French composers with Italian words. But people pick up on this. And the madrigal develops. There's a lot happening at the time. Not only is the printing presses absolutely churning stuff out in Lyon, in Venice especially, not so much in London, I'm afraid. We're rather behind on things here again. But they're kicking out these books. The other thing is that Tuscan Italian, the language they speak in Florence, at this time is being pushed as the proper Italian, what we call in English the Queen's English. And in particular, a man called Bembo who's pushing this. And one of the things they're doing is they're pushing the sonnets of Francesco Petrarca as we call him in English, who comes from 200 years earlier. But Tuscan Italian has really not changed a lot in those 200 years. And so they're encouraging composers are setting Petrarch in this book of his called Canzoniere, the songbook, which is all these 14-line sonnets 300 years before Shakespeare, setting his love affair supposedly with this beautiful woman called Laura. We don't even know whether she exists. And it became wildly fashionable to set sonnets, 14-line sonnets about Laura. And Petrarch eventually becomes less popular, and they get into sort of lighter writing. Are we familiar with the term madrigalism? It's a term, isn't it? Word painting. When I was at school, I learned about madrigalisms. Word painting is what we use these days. And it means writing a form of music that very obviously sets the idea of the music. So in Thomas Weelks's madrigal, As Vesta was from Latmos Hill descending, starts As Vesta was from Latmos Hill descending. And you would have a piece by Jacques de Vert that starts Giunto alla tomba, and all the voices go, and it sets the sort of gaping opening of this tomb. If you were writing a piece about laughing, all the voices would be sort of gaily skipping away in a sort of light-hearted manner. So this idea, for the first time, really, first time the madrigalists get hold of this, and we'll find this in our piece. We'll find this a number of times in our piece, but done in a very subtle way, but also in a very emotional way, because the writer Tasso, an Italian poet, 1580s, said, "Oi, you composers, when are you going to write something profound? Instead of just writing stupid madrigalisms, why don't you write something that actually moves us?" And Monteverdi, who knew Tasso, was taken by this. It would seem other composers of the time, Jacques de Vert, not just to write madrigalisms, but something a little bit more profound. And the 25-year-old Monteverdi has produced, at the end of his third book of madrigals, this incredibly intense piece that is visceral. I always say Monteverdi, it gets you here, even when you're singing it. It's not just, a sort of light thing. It's something incredibly powerful. And this is why, I first became aware of Monteverdi in 1976, I suppose. I was 10, singing a Monteverdi Vespers for the first time. And I thought, hang on, this is a bit different from anything else I've heard. And we didn't know much about all his contemporaries at the time. Now there's tons of research done on all his contemporaries, but I think Monteverdi probably stands even higher now than he did then, because the visceral power of his music is so important. Why did Monteverdi write madrigals? Well, he was a composer at the court in Mantua, and this ducal setup here had musicians for the chapel, but it also had extremely highly paid, I'm just putting that out there, extremely highly paid professional singers who were very expressive singers. This is written about them, just how they could move the entire audience. Also highly virtuosic. These are top people that the scout would go and look for. These aren't just sort of someone who was on the back row of a choir that could hold a part. These are star singers, and they were paid vastly more than Monteverdi was paid, which clearly annoyed him, although he did marry one of them, Claudio Catanei, one of the sopranos. Monteverdi arrives in Mantua in 1590, he's 23, and he prints his second book of 5-part madrigals that year. And in 1592, he prints his third, which contains Rimanti in Pace. Let me just show you the frontispiece of the book. There we go. Canto, the top part, singing part. Di Claudio Monteverdi, of Claudio Monteverdi, il terzo libro dei madrigali a 5 voci, the third book of madrigals for 5 boxes, newly composed, novamente composto. And then that's a picture of an organ. I wonder if I can make this slightly larger. Here, yeah. And then the bottom, in Venice, printed by Riccardo Amadino, and then the date, 1592. And then inside, there's a lovely sort of, Serenissimo Signor, il Signor Duca di Mantova, the Duke of Mantua, and then there's the usual sort of grovelly stuff at the top. And then the pieces start. La giovinetta pianta sia dam ba bam bam ba. And when we get to page 13, Where are we? I need to see page 6 on the PDF. There we go. We come to Rimanti in Pace, and there's the top part, the canto part. I'm just going to close this little box here because it's getting in the way, isn't it? And there's the soprano part. Rimanti in pace, alla dolenta bella filida. This is not a treble clef, this is a C clef, telling you where middle C is on the bottom line. So that first line is D. And Renaissance singers would have been very used to these clefs here. So that's sort of a little bit about the piece. It's worth just talking about the voices that take part in this piece, because if you look at your score, you'll see we printed a 6-line score here. And the reason we've done this is because the slight awkwardness of that middle part, the alto part. And Renaissance voices, I mean, they must have been very similar genetically. We haven't massively changed over 500 years, have we? But the 4 basic Renaissance voice types were called, you have to be careful what they're called here, but they're called basso, tenore, alto, and then canto. And canto could be a boy's voice, it could be a woman's voice, it could be a falsettist, someone singing in their falsetto. In other words, what we might call a countertenor. It could be a castrato singer. So that's all on that top part, really. And then the bass one, that's easy. That's Jamie here. He's got a good bottom F. And then up to about a B flat. And at the 11th, like that, that range, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, that is a normal Renaissance range. And that happens to fit Renaissance music very nicely, because then it means you don't have to print ledger lines, extra lines on the top of the bottom of the stage, which is a bit of an inconvenience. So they tended to write for about an octave and a fourth, an 11th. Then you have the tenor line. Now tenor, if you know a little bit of Latin or French, it means to hold. Tiens, my wife will say to me, which is odd as she's Russian, but there you go. Tiens, French, isn't it? Tenere. And the tenor line used to be the line that held plain chant lines, while other voices above them did things faster. So it's literally just the holding part. It really just means a light baritone voice. It doesn't really mean what we get these days, which is a sort of rather higher tenor that sings up to a G and an A. It's a sort of light baritone voice. It's my natural speaking voice. So that's what a tenor meant. And at this pitch, you'll find, you can see from the ranges at the beginning, it's got a middle C, an octave below middle C, up to an E flat. That's a sort of reasonably comfortable baritone. If you don't feel you're a very high tenor, you'll want to be on that line. And then the other part is an alto part. Alto just means high. It also means loud. And that was a part for a bloke to sing, a high bloke, from, say, an F below middle C up to about an A. Now, there are no larynxes left from altos at the time, but we know this was a rare voice, or at least it was rare to find a good one. And there's tons of research about this. Exactly what was it? These days, in French music, you might call it an haute contre, which sounds a little bit like countertenor, but it seems to have been a light voice that could go happily up to A and a B flat, which is why ladies singing this part, you'll find it doesn't go above an A, and an A is a high note, a note of passion. So we put that for altos to sing, and for, maybe we should call them second altos, and for high tenors to sing. And we printed it twice so that you can read it in a clef that you're comfortable with, and it sounds at the same pitch. And then you have 2 of what we're calling soprano parts. The original terms are canto, alto, tenore, basso, cantus, altus, tenore, and bassos. And the thing about the part books is that those part books, when they say basso, it doesn't necessarily mean a bass part. It just means the bottom of the texture. So if Monteverdi had written a madrigal for 2 sopranos and an alto, there are pieces like that, the alto part would be in the basso book because it's the bottom part. All slightly confusing, but it's all clear from our score, which we've made specially for this with the 6 parts that are really 5. Okay, that's a sort of introduction, I think. I wonder any questions that Jamie wants to throw at me at this stage, things I've massively confused at this stage of the game.
This is fantastic, Robert. Thank you. I would just prompt everybody, please do put questions in the chat. I've seen 1 or 2 so far. But do, by all means, put questions in the chat, and we'll probably have a few minutes a little bit later on to answer as many as we can.
Would now be a good opportunity to listen to perhaps the first part of the piece, which will also give people a chance to write out any questions if they have them. Great, lovely. And Jamie's got the track and the music at the same time, and follow as best you can. And we'll come back to the text afterwards, but let's just hear the noise the music makes. And this is a special recording. We've recorded this piece on a Chandos disc, but this is a new recording that we've made specially for Stay at Home Choir.
You know what I'm going to say, everyone. Practice the clap. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Just grab that unmute button, Robert.
Still, after a year, not remembering to unmute myself. There you go. So yes, intense stuff. And I mean, the extraordinary thing about Monteverdi is that he seems to reinvent the madrigal genre every time he opens his gob, I was going to say, every time he dips his quill into the ink, that piece is so different from all his others. Maybe some of you have sung Sicch'io vuol morire, Io mi son giovinetta. What's a popular piece? Ecco mormora l'onde. That gets sung quite a little bit. And it's so different while being the same. There are very few cliches in it. I say no, there are some things, but he just makes them so much better than other composers. And it's so different from the guy he would have regarded as his boss, Jacques de Wet, who was there just a few years before. Let's just have a little look at the text. Perhaps if I share screen again on my copy, although I think it's at the top of your copy, isn't it? Here you go. There's a picture of Angelo Grillo, who wrote the text. Angelo Grillo was a Benedictine monk, so he shouldn't really be writing naughty poetry, which this, I'm afraid, very much counts as. So he invented another name for himself, Levio Celiano, and this was his alter ego. So when he was writing slightly erotic poetry, this was who he was. And there's the piece, Rimanti. Let me just pop that down to the next line. And as you may have noticed in this piece, nothing happens. It's just a couple of people. Remain in peace, said Tirsi, sighing to old Phyllis. Go on, off you go. That was prescribed to me. I knew you wouldn't have to go. Cruel fate, law, bitter, perverse destiny always said you would have to go. So that's the first bit. That's the first quatrain, if you like, of the sonnet. And now she, now from one and then the other eye. Stella means star, of course, but that's poetic language just for eye. And she now from one and the other eye, distilling, really, dripping, distilling, stillando amaro umore, distilling bitter humours from her eyes. Illumia fisse. But Monteverdi doesn't let go of that, does he? He loves this idea of moisture being distilled. And you can hear it flowing down her cheek. Stillando amaro umore. All these different chromatic lines. And that is the drop slowly going down her cheek. And then illumia fisse, lights, yet another word for eyes. We could have had just occhi for eyes, which is the word for eyes, but instead it's lumi, lights, or stella, stars. On the lights of her thyrsus, e li trafisse il cor, and she pierces his heart, di pietosissime quadrella, with the most pitying arrows. And that pietosissime there, that's a superlative, isn't it? When you get pietosissime at the end of something, it means the most. So pietosa is pitying, but pietosissime is the superlative. And I'd encourage you to make the Italian as onomatopoeic as you can, so that words become to sound what they mean. So il cor di pietosissime, the most pitying arrows. Actually, that's easier to do in French, you know, making words onomatopoeic, but don't expect the chords to do the work for you in this piece. Something I encourage my singers all the time is, you know, they have to imagine that they are embodying the meaning of that word in the colors they bring to it. And stillando amaro is bitter. It's nothing to do with love. That's amore. This is amaro. So we're going to be looking for a sound of amaro that really bites. So that's the first half. Perhaps we could listen to the second half now, and let's maybe do it in reverse order. So we'll look at the text first this time. Onde, whence he, with death imprinted on his face. And at that stage, Monteverdi is going to withdraw all the sharps that he can for this piece, which is in a sort of D majory, A majory sort of thing. So that would give us F sharps, C sharps, G sharps. They're all disappearing, and instead flats are going into the texture. This is a sort of theoretical Renaissance thing, that if you want to increase tension, you go into brighter, sharper keys. So from sort of C up to... And you go the other way if you want to, so we're now in B major, which is 5 sharps. If you want to go if you go the other way, it implies a dropping off in tension, which is what happens here. So he ends up very quickly in A flat major. You can't get further away from D major. Sounds like Carnival of the Animals, doesn't it? He does that in just a few bars, as all the colour leaves his face, whence he, when death imprinted on his face, la sua faccia impressa di morte, death imprinted on his face, says, I, alas, how can I go without you? But he says, without my son, senza mio sole, oh sole mio, same thing, without my son, from torment, from martyrdom to martyrdom, from pain to pain, dollar to dollar. American listeners, and we're talking about doglie here, not money. And then she says, weighed down now, oppressed, oppressa di singhiozzi e pianti, oppressed with sighs and tears, and she weakly forms these words. Fievolmente formò queste parole. Ah, my dear soul, who takes you from me? So you can see what I mean. Absolutely nothing happens in the piece. There's just two people, and one of them says, I've got to go now. And she looks at him, she gives him a bit of a look. He says, why have you got to go? Oh, and that's it. So the meaning of life is not explained in this piece. It's just a kind of emotion. My mother always used to say that Schubert, a composer she loved, would set an old shopping list if someone paid him to. And I kind of wonder whether Monteverdi has fallen into the same thing here. He's set, some of you probably are learn not to underestimate groups of amateur singers. There'll be professors of Italian literature here, and they'll be fuming, but politely so. And Livio Ciliano is probably one of the great poets of the time, but nothing happens in this. We agree on that. So let's hear the second half now. Ondei di morte. Remember that we're going to hear the colour just disappearing from his cheeks at the thought of leaving her here. Over to you, Jamie.
Oof.
I should have said right at the start, this is a big piece. This is 7 minutes long. And what we've done is we've split it into two types of singing, so that E. Fagellini will sing all the direct speech when Thyrsis and Philid are actually saying words, and the stay-at-home choir will sing all the other stuff. And we've made that super clear to see, because all the grayed out stuff that you can barely read, that's the bit that Fagellini are going to sing. And that's marked with E Fag at the beginning of that. And then the bits that you're going to sing, say stay-at-home choir in front of it. So I'd be interested to know what people's sort of reaction to that is, really, because it's a different sort of piece. I mean, even for people who know their Renaissance music, it's a surprising piece, which is sort of why we build this as one of the most interesting pieces of Renaissance music you didn't know, because it's not a well-known thing. It's worth just saying, while the questions flood in, this was written for two reasons. The first reason it's written is because Monteverdi had to provide music as a composer, also a singer, at the Mantuan court for the Monday evening madrigal concerts. But it was, and he was on a salary, he had to write music. At the same time, he is producing madrigal books to make some money on the side. One of Monteverdi's main complaints at the Mantuan court was they didn't pay him on time. There was a nasty official between him and the Duke that was always finding reasons to pay him late. And in fact, when he moved to Venice in 1613, he wrote a letter back to Strigia, who was kind of one of the bosses at the court, and said, quite like being here in Venice. Every Friday I go and get my money. And if I forget to go and get it, a little man comes round with a bag and brings it to me. And, you know, the poor guy, his letters at the end of his life, at the end of his time in Mantua, saying, will you please just release me and let me go? Or I haven't been paid again, or I'm having to put up this soprano to live with us. My wife is having to look after this woman, and we haven't been given the extra money. So it was a real struggle. And I think moving from Mantua to Venice was very, very pleasurable for him. The big question we're all wondering, of course, is, was it the struggle that produced this incredibly intense music? Is his music perhaps a little bit easier at Venice? And I've come to the sort of feeling that probably, yes, it is. I think most of his greatest music was written before 1612. Think of the 1610 Vespers, which I'm sure a lot of you will have sung, music that he wrote in the years leading up to that time, and then published it in an attempt to get out of looking for a job for his son, but also for himself away from Mantua. Right, there's some really good questions coming in. Right, let's deal with some of them. Okay, fine.
A very interesting one from Stephanie Jones, who's noticed that the top two lines actually have quite a similar range, and often the second part, the lower part, goes higher in pitch than the first. Is there a reason behind that?
Well, the first thing she says, yes, that's right, in that the second part is fractionately the tessitura, the general area it occupies. When I'm doing it with Tutti, and we've got a mezzo and a soprano, I tend to put the soprano on the second part and the mezzo on the first part, but they're both low soprano lines. You remember this canto part that's suitable for boys, castratos, falsettists, women. Of course, what the actual performing pitch was, it may be the A in Venice at that time was a little bit higher, but by the time they'd sold copies to someone in Dresden, it would have been a different pitch. I think what we have to accept is that pitch back then didn't mean what it did now. It's only in 1938 that sort of everyone agreed that A would be 440 vibrations a second. I was doing a project in Germany a couple of years ago, and I was told that A would be 443 because the horns had been made A 443. Pitch was not fixed in the same way that it is now, and people would have sung it. I mean, what the clef tells you at the beginning is where to put your semitones. So if you go onto CPDL or one of these websites now, you might well find an edition of this pitch upper tone from this that happens to fit sopranos better. Certainly if you wanted to do it with a normal SATB choir, you would probably stick it up a tone so that the sopranos were a little bit more comfortable. The altos singing the alto line were not in their boots all the time. The tenors had to sing a little bit higher, and all the baritones could sing the bass parts. But the whole point of this piece is that you've got a tenor on the alto line saying, "Ai come andrò senza mio sole." It has a certain color to it, you see. So we've decided to accept that and not push the whole thing up and allow tenors to release their inner caruso, I think, and just to let go a little bit. Someone talks about dynamics and where are the dynamics. Monteverdi did use the odd dynamics in his 17th century scores. By the time he gets to sort of 1638, you will find the odd dynamic saying just loud or soft, but not very many. And he would have regarded that almost as an affront. You don't give that much information to people. They make up their own minds. That way the tenors can argue with the sopranos, and that's always good. But I always think my starting point in this is, what does the music tell you? And if you have a tenor, an alto voice, that's a tenor singing high in their voice, singing "Ai come andrò senza il mio sole," it has a certain drama to it. The text is dramatic. It's a scream, isn't it? Almost. Obviously, a scream in a very sensitive early music, making sure we're all blending all those kind of things that you've done in the previous 11 iterations of Stay at Home Choir. But that suggests to me a strong sound. Whereas the soprano is going, suggests to me a soft sound. Now, I can choose to fight against that and say we're going to sing it forte, but the sopranos will soon kill themselves vocally and decide that's not a very good thing. So I'm always very interested in what the music tells you. So I think you choose the line that you decide is higher. We need some of you at least to be singing that top line. If you're a first alto, you may not want to sing the part marked alto. You may be happier on that top line. Have a little look, see what feels comfortable. We're singing at A440. Reminding me a bit of Hawaiian music. Great, well, there you go. Tears and Arrows, I think is let's just go back to the text. Tears and Arrows is the look that she has given him. We've done a Sing the Score on this. If you want to go and have a look at it, it's out there. It's number 17 or something. We can put you can just find it on YouTube. It's terribly simple. And Greg Skidmore and his partner Rebecca Lee do a kind of dramatization in 8 seconds about what this piece is about. And she gives him a look at one point. So if you're not used to this kind of overdramatic text, she pierced his heart with the most pitying arrows that have come straight from her eyes to him. So it's kind of, she gives him a look. We all have partners. We've all been in love. We know what it is when someone gives you a look. It's so much more powerful than actual words. So that's what those arrows are. That's why they pierced his heart. And then the second, and she, well, that I think answers that question.
So it's an interesting question from Galina and also seconded by Stacey, who are asking, is the text part of a bigger poem? Because it feels sort of tantalizing that we arrive in media res and then we're left hanging.
Yes, exactly.
Where do we go to find out more?
I don't know whether my friend Sylvia is here today. I asked my friend Sylvia about all these things. She's such an authority on it, but I don't know. I believe this is a series of, you have to imagine a sort of dilettante circle of poets and composers writing stuff almost to impress each other in the latest style. The composer Gesualdo, that some of you may have come across, was certainly in that sort of style of writing, and nothing has to happen. It's about a feeling, an emotion. How can you embody something and still write a 14-line sonnet? If I just quickly go back to this, let's note that the sonnet has a rhyming scheme. So we've gone from bella, if you look at the ends of each line, bella, disse, scrisse, bella. So we would call that A, B, B, A. The rhyming is the same on line 1 and 4, and then 2 and 3. So bella, disse, scrisse, bella, stella, fisse, quadrella. So that's normal. The first 2 quatrains, 4-line verses, have that rhyming scheme. And then when we get into the second half of the piece, impresa, sole, doglie, oppressa, parole, toglie. So what you got there is C, D, E, C, D, E. And that's part of the fun of writing these pieces. And someone else was asking about Morna's mentioned poetry wrote whole sequences of sonnets. Yes, that is absolutely true. I don't believe this is one of them, but yet that is absolutely a thing. Now, what was that question I just saw about? styles of voices. Well, isn't this interesting? Because I'm imagining, especially after working with King Singers and other groups, you'll be thinking, but they're using vibrato. Vibrato wasn't used in the 16th century. We weren't there. We don't know. And I'm terribly sorry if this isn't a convenient answer, but I'm interested in this both as a singer who listens when he sings, I hope, to the sound about me. I'm listening to the style of the music that you can make. I don't use very much vibrato in my voice. But it is an inconvenient truth that A, we don't know, and B, they barely wrote about it. And when they did write about it, they didn't use the word vibrato. They used all sorts of other words, and those words may or may not mean things to do with vibrato. There is a fabulous 10-minute program on this by Elam Rotem, Elam from the group Profeti della Quinta. And I'll get Tori to send this to you on an email. It's a wonderful 10 minutes because all he does is, without prejudice, examines every single source in 10 minutes. It's quite impressive about how we think they sing in the 16th and 17th century. And he says, if you have to come to one conclusion, it's that more sources talk about Merlin, more sources talk about singing with vibrato than don't. That doesn't mean you have to. I mean, the idea that they all sang the same way in the 16th century is plainly ludicrous, isn't it? How can we know? In Dresden, they would have sung in one way. People with small voices would have sung in one way. But I think one crucial truth is you wouldn't have had to develop your voice to sing very loudly over an orchestra in a large operatic room. That wouldn't have been a thing. What we do know about Renaissance music, noting it's 7:01 and we must stop, is that there were certain things that they prioritized. And the biggest thing that they talk about as priority, apart from beauty of tone, is intelligibility. So ladies and gentlemen, I say to you, go back home, stay at home and look at these texts and try to make sense of them. I'm thinking that some of you will have a little bit of Latin or Italian or French or Spanish, or just speak English well and enjoy all these Italianization of words in our own language. Because when you know that oppressa means weighted down, oppressed with, you can sing the line more easily. Rimanti in pace. Oh, my assistant is bringing me wine and crisps. Cheers, everyone. Fabulous. It's Friday evening. Thank you, Gladys. She's not really called Gladys. She's called Manon because my wife is in fact French and not Russian. And so I beg you to spend as much time to start with on getting to know the text, because, final thing, when you sing syntactically, when you sing with an understanding of what is your noun and what is your verb and what is your object, if there is one, you will automatically sing more expressively. It's no good just generally getting passionate. You need to know where the main parts of speech are.
I love the way that you say that. It's stay at home and learn the text rather than go home and learn the text. But it's absolutely right, and it flags up what some I saw in the chat earlier on is that, you know, how do you find your way around dynamics? The text gives you so much of it, and when you understand the text, so much of the musicality of how you express it is going to come naturally to you. Robert, thank you so much for a fascinating session. It is just, if you can go on gallery view, you'll see rounds of applause coming to you.
Very good. Oh, yeah, certainly in my ego to take that.
And our typical stay-at-home choir jazz hands are there as well. Thank you so much. We can't wait to embark on this project with you. Sunday is going to be another voyage of discovery, delving further into what a madrigal is. So do join us for that. And in the meantime, be like Robert and go and enjoy your Friday evening.
Just before you all go, I'm just putting a little URL in there. There's a series and you can go and visit it they're all take 5-minute pieces about music, and we break it down a little bit and talk about this. We'll need to get onto rehearsal from now on, I know, but I think you might find this useful. Also, we have extremely small numbers of people actually viewing it, so it'd be nice to get some more people there. Lovely to be part of you. See you next time.
Take care, everybody. Bye.
Goodbye. See you soon.
Oh, I should also flag up that if you have any questions about anything, go to the FAQs. We've seen a lot of questions recently on the Facebook group, which are answered in the FAQs. So do go and check it out first to see if your question has been anticipated by the wonderful Stay at Home Choir team. Anything else I've forgotten, Jamie?
I think that's about it. Have a lovely weekend, everybody. See you at the next one.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Enjoy your wine,
Robert.
Robert.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Terry.
Thank you.
Robert. Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert.
Bye.
Bye, Robert.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Any crisp, Robert? Any wine coming of the ether?
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
I see. In fact, there were quite a few Italians there, including Sylvia.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Graham.
Thanks, Robert.
Bye.
Get out of it.
See you next week.
Something comes up. I don't even want it. And
So, Lisa.
Bye, everybody. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Sorry.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care. Bye, Michael. Bye, Mary. Bye, Rosalind. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Lynette. Bye, Lorna. Bye, Sunny. Oh, Lorna. I've done part books. Just so you know. There are part books on the way.
Oh.
Bye, Robert. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody. Jamie, you have the red button.
I do have the red button. Goodbye, everyone. I'm going to hit